First off, we haven't had a chance to talk since those tariffs have dropped. What do you make of this announcement? By all measures, it was probably the worst possible outcome. Would you agree?
Well, it certainly beat expectations because look at the market reaction overnight. Clearly, investors had not anticipated anything of this magnitude. And so investors have spoken. They probably don't like, at least at first look, what they're seeing because it is very disruptive. It does feel like a major turn away from really a standard of global trade, which we had for decades, which is gradual liberalization. And now suddenly we see these restrictions come in, and particularly for a region like Asia, built on exports, built on manufacturing exports, especially dependent on the US market. That, of course, hits home here, and it will require major retooling of economies here, a major strategizing. Yes, there's a hope that maybe the door is still open to reduce some of these tariffs and negotiate, but even if there's a marginal reduction in these tariff levels, they're still going to be very high. And that means I would need to think harder about where Asia is going over time in terms of its economic model.
Fred, first off, I want to get to talk to you about the policy response from Asia, right, which you would probably agree has been probably hardest hit by the tariffs around the globe, right, this part of the world, in other words. And I'm reminded here of a quote from Thucydides, right? That, those with power, I'm paraphrasing here, those with power can do what they want. The rest of us, right, the weak must suffer what they must. I mean, it certainly applies out here to Asia because we see China, just about the only one, pushing back, threatening retaliation, demanding that the tariffs be dropped immediately or else, while everybody else seems to be going, okay, look, we better not retaliate. We'll just sort of suck it up and see what we can do for ourselves at home. Is that fair?
I think it's fair to say that smaller economies in Asia, much more trade dependent than the large ones, China, India, for example, are harder hit here and will that have to think harder about how to maybe appease U.S. demands, maybe find a way to negotiate. But the big ones, China in particular, maybe they can take their time. They can retaliate at the margin, and they are large enough to sort of inflict some pain, if you will, on the U.S. economy as well, because they're a large market in their own right. American companies have big interest in the Chinese economy. China is an important exporter of very critical goods to the global economy, and therefore it's not as if all Asia is necessarily in the back foot. There is a way, I think, for some Asian economies to say this is going too far.